بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين اللهم إني نويت التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Now, following on from last week, we saw that the Imam was speaking at length about the inseparable relationship between one's belief and one's action. And the Imam continues to say, and this is page 1213 in the text, the very first line. The Imam says, أيها الولد ما لم تعمل لم تجد الأجر. That insofar as you do not act, you will find no recompense. In other words, we've been told that the akhirah is acquired through righteous deeds. We've been told that the akhirah is acquired through righteous deeds. And it's because of these righteous deeds that we're recompensed, given reward. And it's this recompense which is Jannah. So the recompense for our good deeds is Jannah and all of the delights that are associated with Jannah. But how can there be Jannah if there are no good deeds to recompense? So that's what the Imam is continuing from his last piece of advice. How can someone expect there to be Jannah when there are no good deeds? When Allah has told us that, look, your deeds are a means for you to acquire Allah's pleasure and to acquire Jannah. Now, if someone never acted in accordance with what Allah has asked them to do, or acted very little, there is nothing in their bank account to show Allah. And so here the Imam recounts a beautiful story of an extremely pious individual from the Bani Israel. And this person worshipped Allah for 70 years. And so let's see what the story is, and we'll translate it, and then we'll go into some detail explaining some of the points that we can understand from this narrative. And so the Imam says, حُكِيَ أَنَّ رَجُلًا مِّن بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَبَدَ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى 70 سَنَةً. That it is related that a man from the tribe of Israel worshipped Allah the Exalted for 70 years. فَأَرَادَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى أَنْ يَجْلُوَهُ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. And so Allah the Exalted wished to show him to the angels. We'll explain all of this in a second, but we'll read the story. So Allah wished to show this individual to the angels. فأرسل الله إليه ملكا يخبره أنه مع تلك العبادة لا يليق به دخول الجنة. And so Allah sent an angel to this man to inform him that in spite of this worship, 70 years of worship, entering the garden was not fitting for him. فلما بلغه قال العابد. And so when this person learnt of this, when he heard this worshipper, he said, نحن خلقنا للعبادة فَيَنْبَغِي لَنَا أَن نَعْبُدَهُ. That we are created for worship, and it is incumbent on us to worship Allah. Allah. فَلَمَّا رَجَعَ الْمَلَكُ قَالَ إِلَهِ أَنْتَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا قَالَ. And so when the angel went back to Allah, what does the angel say? Allah, you know best what he said. And so what does Allah Azza wa Jal say? فقال الله تعالى إذا هو لم يعرض عن عبادتنا فنحن مع الكرم لا نعرض عنه. That Allah replies and says, since he did not turn away from worshipping us, we will not turn away from him with our grace. اشهدوا يا ملائكتي أني قد غفرت له. That bear witness, my angels, that I have forgiven this person. And so we can see that there's a number of really interesting points related to this account. Firstly, this short story, this short narrative, it supports the Imam's earlier discussion on the inseparable relation between knowledge and action, or more specifically how one's iman and action are related. You can't separate one from the other. But how is that the case? Because here we have a person who has lived a saintly life from all accounts. So all he's done is worshipped Allah. And yet the story tells us that he gains Jannah through Allah's mercy and grace. So the idea that the Imam has been speaking about is that, look, you need this bank of good deeds. And these good deeds will have a reward. But what he also tells us is that these deeds are not the thing that's going to get you to Jannah. What's going to get you to Jannah is Allah's mercy and Allah's fadl, His grace. And so here we have a person who, despite the fact that he's worshipped for 70 years, lived a saintly life, he's still being told that Allah at the end doesn't say, okay, because he worshipped for 70 years, we will now open the doors of paradise for him. No. Because he didn't turn away from us. What does not turning away from us indicate here? He didn't show any arrogance. If you look at the story of Iblis, what's Iblis' story? It's a complete opposite. When he's presented with something, he had how many, Allah knows best, years, we don't know. Thousands, hundreds, however many years it was of worship. But when he was faced with a scenario where he had to confront the purpose of all that he was doing, what did he say? Ana khayrun minhum, but I'm better than him. Right? In other words, all this preceding worship, what was it? And that's why you'll see that one of the lessons from the story of Iblis is the danger of pseudo-religiosity. People who act religious, but really they're probably doing it for something else. Even sometimes they don't recognize it. Outwardly they're doing everything and people are even talking about them. Do we not hear about Iblis's feats of worship? That, they say that how many spaces and places are there in the cosmos that he actually worshipped Allah. We still hear about those stories. They're recorded. But what was all that worship for? So when it came to it, when he was faced with that scenario of here's a being that Allah has created, in other words, here's a moment from Allah for you to reflect on, or for you to think about, and his response is, I'm better than him. I'm not going to bow down. This person has 70 years of worship, a much smaller amount most likely, and when he's told, look, there's nothing in it for you in terms of reward, he says, okay, alhamdulillah. Now, because of that, Allah doesn't say, okay, put his 70 years in a scale. His 70 years don't amount to anything. As we've said before, if we were to accumulate all of our worship into a short space of time, all of the salah and all the fast and everything together, it barely adds up to, a couple of years of a 70-year life. Where are we going to weigh 2 to 3 years worth of accumulated worship compared with the blessing of, let's say, the eye, the blessing of just health, and the blessing of sound hands, tabarakallah, and there's no way that there's not a single. Allah says in the Quran that if you were to enumerate ni'mat Allah, just one of Allah's blessings, you'll never be able to do it. If you think that you can worship Allah for eons and that's going to recompense for what Allah's given us of one blessing, never be able to do it. So how about all the countless multi-billions of blessings that we have every moment of every day? In other words, nothing that we do will allow us to put our scales in our deeds in a scale with Allah's blessings. And so this person is being told it's through Allah's mercy and Allah's grace that he's going to enter into paradise, which is also evidenced by the fact that when the angel tells him that his worship does not entitle him to Jannah, the angel is saying that it's not your deeds, right? That good deeds don't causally necessitate Jannah. We've also heard that from the Imām in the last few bits of Nasiha, that your good deeds don't necessitate Jannah. It's a very important concept, because when we perform any good deed, sometimes we do have it in our mind, maybe subconsciously, that look, alhamdulillah, I'm doing good, as if we're doing something good. By which I mean that I'm earning it now, I'm deserving it. It has nothing to do with deserve. In fact, the great salihin of this ummah, they say, Ya Allah, don't take us to account for what we deserve. Even though you may have lived a life that you never did anything wrong, never say, Allah, give me what I deserve. That's why they say, Ya Allah, don't take us to account for what we really deserve. Take us to account in a manner that befits who you are. That's the way that the awliya, they ask Allah to, our relationship with Allah to be, right? And so what the idea here is that there is this response of this individual. It's also indicating to us that there's nowhere mentioned that good deeds or worship is conditioned on reward. I mean, when do you ever find it written that there's some necessary link between you doing this and that Allah has to reward you? No. You're given these, as I've said in the past, and the ulama, they say, human beings were mercantile. We like to know what's in it for us. So Allah tells us, look, if you do this worship, it's really not only good for you in this dunya, but it's actually going to get you all these great rewards in the akhirah as well. So it's sort of encouraging us in that way. But then your account mentions that Allah wants to show him to the angels. لِيَجْلُوَهُ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ. What does that mean? That Allah wants to show this individual to his angels. Look at this person here. Right? And this is really interesting. Now, why would Allah want to show his angels one of his saintly slaves? Right? Because he is a being, this abd from Bani Israel. He's a slave of Allah. He is a being with free will, complete free will, and he can choose what he wants to do. He can worship Allah if he wants, and if he wanted to, he could choose not to worship Allah. But with this free will, he chooses to worship Allah, and because of that, it shows you the rank that the honored rank and the sincerity of worshipful slaves, that Allah has such slaves and he wants to show them to his angels, because angels have no free will in that sense, right? They do what they're told. Allah's saying, look, here's a being that I've created that has free will. He can choose not to obey me, but look what he's done. He spent his entire existence in my worship. We know that Allah Azza wa Jal has angels, that he's created them just for the purpose of being in sajda. That's their entire existence is in sajda. From the moment they were created until the moment that the trumpet blows. And what's their response when the trumpet blows and they're asked to raise their head? They say, Subhanaka ma abadnaka haqqa ibadatik. That glory be to you, Ya Allah, we didn't worship you in the way that you deserve to be worshipped. They've not done anything apart from being in a state of sajda their entire existence. Right? Here's a man, but they have no choice. Whereas this man has a choice. This person has a choice. So can you see the immensity of what we can do as beings? We can rise up to the heavens, or we become lowly like animals. It's just if we really understand why we're here. And so despite being told that his worship doesn't entitle him to Jannah, his response is of a person who understands that the greatest thing in existence is to worship Allah. Right? His response is almost like, who said anything about reward? Because look at his response. He says, "Nahnu khuliqna lil ibadah." He doesn't say, "Oh, really? Oh, okay." No, his response immediately is, "Nahnu khuliqna lil ibadah." Who said anything about reward? We've been created to worship. Reward or no reward, I'm doing what we're supposed to be doing. I didn't mention anything about reward. Right? It's a beautiful concept if you think about it. It doesn't even enter into the mind that, because the people who worship Allah with their entire being, those that sort of taste worship, they know that there is nothing greater than it. So, think about the most pleasurable thing that you do in this world. We spoke about this last week, whether it's, in the moment, eating food or spending time with your friends or, wherever you think you get your shahwa from. Your desires are fulfilled, right? Wherever that may be. At the moment that your desires are being fulfilled, do you step outside of yourself and think, I wonder what reward I'm getting for my desire being fulfilled? Because you're getting it fulfilled there and then. What can possibly be beyond the deep pleasure that you're feeling of fulfilling your desires right there? You're in the moment. That is the reward. The true people of Allah who worship Allah with their entire being, they are in those states. And so for them, it's like this narration is telling, this narrative, I beg your pardon, is telling us, who said anything about reward? I'm in those states of pleasure. Because what do the awliya, they say that, كُلْ مَا تَهْوَى مَوْجُودْ فِي ذَاتِ اللَّهِ. Everything that you desire is there in Allah. What do you want that's missing? Nothing. So these people, they are in those states. And so when Allah says in this narrative towards the end that bear witness, it says, Naam, ishhadu ya malaikati, that bear witness. The scholars say that it means that even though the good deeds don't necessitate Jannah or reward, this is a way of Allah telling us that be certain that ibadah does benefit, both in the dunya and the akhirah. Right? And you will be rewarded. For otherwise, why would Allah ask anyone why would He bear witness? Why would He ask anyone to bear witness to what Allah is saying? If I were to say something, I'd say, Tawsif, bear witness that I've taken money off Nadeem. So if there's any doubt, then you're the witness for that, right? But Allah doesn't need anyone to bear witness for Him. Because A, Allah never goes against His promise. And B, Allah knows everything. He doesn't need to be reminded that you said that. So the scholars say because the outward reasons for asking someone to bear witness are these sorts of things, and because these things don't apply to Allah, it means it's a confirmation that, look, don't think though that your good deeds are going to go to waste, because Allah reminds us in the Quran that Inna Allah la yudhi'u amala man ahsana amala, that Allah doesn't waste the deeds of those who engage in good deeds. You will be rewarded for them, but just know it's not because of the deeds. It's because Allah has ennobled you and given you grace and His mercy, and that's why we do what we do. Then the Imam says, quotes a hadith where he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا وزنوا أعمالكم قبل أن توزن عليكم. That Allah's Messenger alayhi salam said, call yourselves to account before you are called to account, and weigh up your deeds before they are weighed for you. And so they say that, hasibu anfusakum, to take yourself to account. They say one of the ways of taking yourself to account is by increasing in your good deeds. Do more. Add more to your balance. That's one way of doing your own hisab, is just keep on doing more so that your scales are getting heavier and heavier with good deeds. And as we mentioned last week, that hasaba, what's the root of hasaba? Right, hasiba, the hain, the ha, the sin, and the ba, right? But if you flip those same three letters around, what do you get? Habs. And habs is being imprisoned. and if you flip the same three letters around, what do you get? Sabah, which is where subhanallah comes from. And why is that important? Because the one who engages in muhasaba, i.e. takes oneself to account, the conclusion that they'll reach is one of two. Either they'll be in a state of subhanallah, or they'll be in a state of habs, imprisonment. The word itself is telling us that, just rearranging the three root letters, the ha, the sin, and the ba. And as I say all the time, Arabic really does tell us about the relationship between language and reality. Now, and then we have here a saying of the great Sayyidina Ali, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu ardahu. Really, when we mention these names, we should just pause, just let the barakat come down. And this is Sayyidina Ali, who said, "Lo kushif al-ghita lamazdadtu yaqina." You remember that that was a very first opening statement that we started these sessions almost 3 years ago. That's the first line of the Book of Assistance, right? That lo kushif al-ghita lamazdadtu yaqina. That were the veil between me and Allah to be removed, it wouldn't increase me in certainty. Right? And I've got that framed on my wall. Just think, what does that even mean? It's you're living your life as if you're Allah. There's no veils between you and Him. You're there. You're seeing Him. To say that nothing that can happen that will increase me in my certainty. And those statements are statements of the greats that you just have to take time out and think, yeah, you know what? I think time to go home now, just to reflect on that end of today's session. Because, like I say, there's no way that you can comprehend that, even spending, hours and days and weeks and months really trying to reflect. SubhanAllah, what were these people experiencing? When we say the shahada, we say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Right? It's called a testification. I testify, right? But shahada also in Arabic means I witness. So for the Sahaba, it's really a witnessing. They were seeing it. I can see that there's no Allah there's no deity except Allah. And I can see that the Prophet ﷺ is the messenger of Allah. So what they were experiencing, and as a result of which we find these statements, we have a similar statement from the companion Haritha. They say he was 17 years old when he said this. When the Prophet ﷺ saw him one morning, and I think the narration tells us that he was sleeping outside the masjid, I think. And the Prophet ﷺ asked the question to Haritha and said, Kayfa asbahta, how are you this morning? And what did Haritha say? He said, Asbahtu mu'minan haqqa. That today I've woken up as it's difficult to even translate that, because if you were to literally translate it, it means today I've woken up as a true believer. But then he's a companion. He was already a believer. So what does that mean? Today I've woken up as a true believer. And so the Prophet ﷺ inquired about that. And what did he say? His response was, it's as if I can see the delights of the people of paradise, and I can see the torment of the people of hellfire, and it's كأنني أنظر إلى الله, like it's as if I'm looking at Allah. It's a this deep ma'rifah. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ says that, look, arafta falzam, that now you've reached sort of ma'rifah, you've come to this state, don't let it go. 17 years old. Right? If someone has the exact wording of the hadith, we can pull it up and just correct the end part, what the exact wording is. But again, what does this mean? The Sahaba are not just saying it, they're living it, they're experiencing something that we get these statements from them. And so Sayyidina Ali, what does he tell us? The great Sayyidina Ali, radiyallahu anhu wardahu, من ظن أنه بدون الجهد يصل فهو متمن ومن ظن أنه ببذل الجهد يصل فهو مستغن. That whoever believes that he will attain his goal without effort is a wishful thinker. In other words, you're not doing anything and you think you're going to get somewhere. Whether it's Jannah or whether you're going to get something in this dunya, you're not going to get it. It's a wishful thinker, you're a daydreamer. And whoever believes he will reach his goal by expending of effort is presumptuous, i.e. arrogant. That, yeah, I'm going to get Jannah because I'm doing everything I should be doing. Right? It has to be a state of humility in front of Allah. That how do I know that the ibadah that I'm doing, how much of it contains me? And we're going to come across this, in fact, in just the very next the statement after this. And then you have a saying of the great Hassan. وقال الحسن رحمه الله تعالى طلب الجنة بلا عمل ذنب من الذنوب. That seeking Jannah without action is a sin. Seeking Jannah without action is a sin. Why? Because just as not engaging in good deeds is a sin, likewise requesting or asking for Jannah without any actions is a sin. You don't do anything, can you ask Allah for Jannah? Right? And then the Imam says, وَقَالْ, and there's a couple of additions to this. The meaning amounts to the same, but in the text that you're reading from, it says, عَلَامَةُ الْحَقِيقَةِ تَرْكُ مُلَاحَظَةِ الْعَمَلِ لَا تَرْكُ الْعَمَلِ. But in other editions it says, وَقَالَ عَالِمٌ الْحَقِيقَةِ تَرْكُ مُلَاحَظَةِ الْعَمَلِ لَا تَرْكُ الْعَمَلِ. There's not a great difference in meaning, so we can keep it as it is. Which essentially is, as the text says, that an indication of the true state of affairs of a believer is to give up paying attention to action, not to give up action. Now, this is important because what does it mean to you know, the real way of approaching things in the world is in your ibadah is to take yourself out of it. Don't give any consideration or regard to who or what you're doing in terms of, look how great I did this. There's a hadith in Sahih Muslim in which we're told that إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْعَبْدَ التَّقِيَ الْغَنِيَ الْخَفِيَ. That Allah loves the slave who is a taqi, someone who's, has taqwa, and who's ghani. Not someone who's necessarily, because ghani means wealthy, but doesn't necessarily mean that, even though some scholars like Qadi Ayad says it means that. But it means someone has ghina nafs. You're a dignified soul, dignified individual. You're not you're not debasing yourself in front of other people. And it's this last bit which relates to what we're discussing, which is al-khafi, that Allah loves the slave who is khafi. What does that mean? He's hidden. Keeps himself to himself. Someone who just focuses on their own worship and concerns themselves with themselves. Not, I'm going to be somewhere, I'm going to be in. Again, Imam Ghazālī is very clear about these things in the way he speaks about it. That look, going to places, studying knowledge, wanting people to observe what you're doing. And that could be directly or indirectly. It could be that you come to gatherings, you go to the masjid, you come to classes, you teach maybe, right? But there's a sense that you want people to know he organized that and he was responsible for that, right? It should be, look, there's nothing in this that I want anyone to know about what I'm doing. And so it's to free yourself from those thoughts. You're not doing it for anyone apart from Allah. And the best course of action is to be someone who's just hidden from people. And there's a beautiful hadith that's narrated by Abu Hurairah in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ tells us, رُبَّ أَشْعَثَ أَغْبَرَ مدفوع بالأبواب لو أقسم على الله لأبره. The translation of which is that how many ash'ath in Arabic is the one who's disheveled. When you've traveled through the deserts, your hair gets disheveled. So you're in a disheveled state. Someone's been on a long journey when you see someone who's ash'ath, disheveled. Rubba ash'ath, how many a disheveled person have you ever met? Aghbar, who's also covered in dust. So it's almost saying this person is not only disheveled, but their clothes are of someone who's just, seen life. Madfu' bil abwab, that here is an individual that has no social status, nothing, no rank amongst the people. He's seen to be from the down and out. No one even turns to look at this individual, right? Because if you look at the outward appearance, people turn him away all the time, right? But if this individual were to take an oath by Allah, Allah would answer him immediately. Right? What's it saying to us? No one even knows him. He's quote unquote a nobody. He's a down and out. He has no social status. No one wants to even sit and talk to him. Madfu' ind al-abwab literally means that when he comes to your door, you chase him away. You say, I don't want to know you. Who are you? And what are we told about such an individual? لو أقسم على الله لأبره. But were he to take an oath by Allah, Allah will make sure that oath comes to pass. That's khafi, someone who's unknown. And that's the true nature of really, as Ibn Ata'illah says, that look, what you should want to do is you should bury yourself in the soil of obscurity, as deep as you can go. Because if you want a plant to grow, what do you do with it? You don't throw it in the air. You put it down as deep as it goes. It's completely out of sight. The hard work of that plant is taking place out of sight. No one can see what's going on. But it's being tended to. It's growing, and it's growing slowly. Now if you think about it, you think, what is the weight of that soil on that little seed? If you were 2 feet underneath, 6 feet underneath, and you can't come back out, you can't push the earth from above you. How is it possible for this tiny little seed to go through that weight of soil and then appear outside, above the soil? It's a miracle if you think about it, right? It has no self-capacity to do that, but what it's doing is it's doing its hard work away from the eyes of people. And the only moment that it now becomes visible to others is when the root structure has been so firmly planted within the soil, outside of the view of people, that automatically that person becomes visible to others. Just like this seed. You don't have to do anything. But at that point, what does that seed do? The seed doesn't have to say, people, I'm here. People will come to it and take the benefit. Does the plant that comes from the ground walk on its feet and say, look, here I am, I've got all this lovely fruit for you, all these lovely tomatoes and whatever grows on them? No. People will now come to this plant and take benefit from it. And when it's given its benefit, it will go back into the earth from where it came. It's a beautiful way of looking at the similitude, if you like, of how the believer should be. That if the hard work is taking place out of sight, when no one can see, you're becoming stronger in your Imām, becoming stronger in who you are in front of Allah. You're experiencing what you should be experiencing as an individual who's Abdullah. Right? By the time you come out above surface, you don't even care what's above there. Because you know, listen, home is here. Home is what it's buried deep inside. That's who I am. Right? And you're just standing there, people are coming to you, taking benefit, and that's it. Indifferent to what people... If people never came, that's okay as well. Allah will never let your fruits go to waste. Insects will eat them. And that's true. Because don't think that if people didn't know who you are, and you were that pious, that your being is somehow going to be not beneficial, because we're told that the things that we believe around us that are otherwise inanimate, or not aware of us, they will benefit. The grass will benefit. The animals will benefit. The fishes in the oceans will benefit. Why? Because what does the hadith tell us? That when a pious person passes away, even the fishes in the oceans continue to ask Allah to forgive this individual until the Day of Judgment. Fishes. Right? So how about the trees and the plants and the grass? That's what I mean. It doesn't have to be, you're leaving behind a legacy of benefit for the creation of Allah, and human beings are one part of that creation. And so, I remember once one of our teachers telling us that there was someone who went to Europe, some part of Europe, I think it was one of the Scandinavian countries, I can't remember. And they said that they were finding it a bit of a challenge in terms of their dawah. And they said, look, what can you advise us? What should we do? How should we approach this so that people's hearts can become recipient to what we're trying to give them, i.e. Islam? And so the Shaykh said, look, go into the countryside, and as you're walking through the countryside, do dhikr. Engage in the dhikr of Allah. Why? Because as you're doing dhikr, Allah's blessings are descending. And the descending blessings are being appropriated by the soil. And the soil will then bring forth food that will have those blessings of your dhikr in there. And the people then will take from that and they will eat that food. And that will soften their hearts to your message. It's just an incredible way of looking at things, isn't it? That this affair is far bigger than what we think it is. No? And so this idea here that don't give regard to what you're doing, to your actions. Be someone who's a hidden believer. And if Allah chooses to make you visible for people, then so be it. But it's not something that you should want. And then the Imam concludes this paragraph here, or if indeed he did paragraph it like this, with a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم الكيس من دان نفسه وعمل لما بعد الموت. That the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that the intelligent person, the astute man, the intelligent person is one who passes judgment on himself and works for what is after death. وَالْأَحْمَقْ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى الْأَمَانِي. And the fool is one who pursues vain pleasures, in other words, they're just running after the desires, but counts on Allah the Exalted to realize his wishes. Right? So it's in following on from all that the Imam's been telling us. Then the Imam says, أيها الولد. So I'll just begin this, but we'll take it next week. أيها الولد. كم من ليال أحييتها بتكرار العلم ومطالعة الكتب وحرمت على نفسك النوم. That, O disciple, walad, child, how many a night have you spent rehearsing your learning, in other words, revising what you've been studying, reading books, depriving yourself of sleep. لا أعلم ما كان الباعث فيه. I don't know what your motivation in all of this was. إن كان نيل عرض الدنيا وجذب حطامها وتحصيل مناصبها والمباهاة على الأقران والأمثال فويل لك ثم ويل لك. That if you're doing all of this hard study, so he's talking to a student of knowledge, i.e. you'd think that a student of knowledge is one person, the alim, who should be aware of all of these things. It follows even more than that someone who's not a student of knowledge and not always thinking about and not always reading the books of knowledge and engaged in things which are directly related to the deen, it applies even more to those people who are not engaged in that. So if this is the case of a student of knowledge, that if all of this hard work you're reading and revising and you're depriving yourself of sleep, what's your motivation? If it's winning the goods of the world, the allure of its vanities, getting its honors and vainglory to the debt of your associates and peers, woe to you and woe again. Why? Because knowledge is supposed to be a means for your eternal happiness. But this individual has taken it to be a means to sin. That you've taken something so pure such as knowledge of deen and you've turned it on its head. You've made it into a means to sin, not a means to gain proximity to Allah. But if your objective in all of this was a revival of the Prophet's law, alayhi salam, right? وإن كان قصدك في إحياء الشريعة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وتهذيب أخلاقك وكسر النفس الأمارة بالسوء فطوبى لك ثم طوبى لك. But if you're doing all of this because you're thinking, look, I'm going to deprive myself of sleep, I'm going to work hard, I don't care about whether I'm going to be teaching in front of thousands or hundreds or tens or ones, it makes no difference. My intention is, I believe Allah's sharia there's nothing above that. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach people Allah's deen. And I'm also doing all of this to cultivate my own character and to break my own nafs. You're consciously thinking about that. If that's why you're doing all of this for, then as the Imam says, that blessings upon you and blessings again. So we'll pause here inshallah. And we'll just, I want to repeat something from this paragraph next week, but we won't go through it line by line, but just the first paragraph, this things about the night time and ihya al-layl and what all this means. And we'll continue from there inshallah.